Hello, everyone, and welcome into this edition of Buzzer Beaters. He's Ben Lewis. I'm Max Kleiman. We're going to jump right in, start talking about some interesting Boston sports topics. Let's start with Kevin Love. A lot of people are talking about Kevin Love around Boston. There's a lot of drama going on with him and the Celtics. Could the Celtics get him before the draft night this Thursday? What do you think the Celtics' chances are of getting Kevin Love?
I think there really is a good chance of the Celtics getting Kevin Love. I read an article the other night that said the Timberwolves still do believe the best offer for Love will come from the Boston Celtics, which is a great sign, obviously. I think they have the right picks and the right tools to package in a deal to get him between the 6th overall pick, the 17th overall pick in the draft, and then players like Jared Sullinger, Kelly Olynyk, will make it relatively easy for them to get Kevin Love compared to other teams. I still think it will be a challenge. I think there are a lot of other qualified teams out there, though.
Yeah, I thought that the best offer was going to come from the Golden State Warriors, who looked like they were going to include Klay Thompson in their offer and actually be able to bring in Kevin Love with that offer of picks that they were putting on the table. But new reports are that trade is dead. Who knows if that's real or not? Who knows if that's going to happen? You know, you've got a lot of time until draft night. But it looks like the Celtics are one of these emerging players who legitimately have a chance at Kevin Love. You know, they've got all these picks. They've got 6 and 17. They've got the picks from the Nets. They've got a completely open roster with a ton of players who really, you could trade any of them. None of them are that important to your future success except for maybe Rajon Rondo. But you've got a lot of assets right now and no base, which is what the Celtics need to build. And with Kevin Love, that's what they'd be able to do moving forward into the future, especially with the fact that if LeBron, who opted out of his contract today, if he doesn't go back to Miami, it leaves the East wide open. And the Celtics bringing in Kevin Love would really improve their chances.
That's very true. And you say LeBron leaves and he goes to a team in the Western Conference, just hypothetically. How weak would the Eastern Conference be? It'd be incredibly weak, and that would make the Celtics an immediate contender for the number 1 overall seed in the Eastern Conference if you get Kevin Love. Not to mention, though, when we were talking about assets and tools they have to get Love, they have, I don't forget the exact number, but they have tons of picks over the next 3 years, too, they can package in for a deal. And I think that's going to also play into how, if they do get him, that's how.
Do you think the Timberwolves are concerned at all about doing the same thing that they did with Kevin Garnett? You know, we saw in 2007 the Timberwolves, they packaged up Kevin Garnett, sent him off to the Celtics. They got some assets back. It didn't make them into some great team, but now the Celtics were able to go on and win a championship that year. Do you think they're worried about making that same mistake?
No, not necessarily, to be honest with you. Because Kevin Love has already voiced that he would not go back to Minnesota after this season when he would be an unrestricted free agent. Therefore, I think they feel like they need to trade him, even though they've been pretty stingy about offers so far. Now, say the Celtics do not get Kevin Love. They do have the 6th and 17th overall pick in the draft. What do you see the Celtics doing?
Well, you know, it's really unpredictable. There have been a ton of mock drafts that have come out, and they're all saying different things. But I think the ideal situation for the Celtics is if Joel Embiid can fall to them at that 6th pick. You know, with his surgery that he had, the fact that he's injured, it's really been pushing him down the draft board. He was guaranteed to go in the top 3. Now we're not sure if he'll go in the top 5. Will Utah take him before the Celtics? There have been rumors of that happening. But I think the ideal situation, if the Celtics can't get Kevin Love and be a great team next year, is to get Embiid. I know it's a risk because he might not play next season. He might not make an immediate impact with the Celtics next season, but he's a guy to build around. He's a true talent. He's a big guy who can play down low. I think he's a potential future star on the team, and I think it's worth the risk.
I'm a big Embiid fan myself, but honestly, between the injury now, I don't want to see him turning out to be an injury-ridden guy throughout his career that you wasted a high pick on in a loaded draft. I think he's way too much of a risk considering the other talents that you can have at the 6th spot in this draft this year. Guys like Aaron Gordon. But then there's also been reports today that the Celtics have been talking to the Cleveland Cavaliers about possibly trading for the number 1 overall pick, which would probably land you with Parker or Wiggins, and that'd be a completely different story. So I do see them trying to make a big move on draft night or close to draft day, whether that's trading for the 1 pick or trying to get Kevin Love.
Well, it's interesting. If they think that Joel Embiid's going to fall to them at 6, is it really worth moving up to 1 and trading all those assets to get the first pick? Obviously, Jabari Parker and Andrew Wiggins, they would have so much more of an impact on the Celtics next season. But if Joel Embiid is as good as everyone says he's going to be, and the margin between him and Wiggins and Parker isn't that great, why wouldn't they just try to stay at 6?
Well, the Celtics have already kind of staked their stock in a guy in the draft who fell to them because of injury problems, Jared Sullinger, who's missed time because of his back. But still, me personally, I'm sure Danny Ainge does not feel comfortable with Sullinger all the time because of his really bad injury history, and you don't want to end up having a pick like, how dare I say the name, Greg Oden, and have a guy turn out to be like him who's super hyped but had all these injury problems. You pick him, look what happens. And you don't want, I mean, the Trailblazers haven't been good until the past couple of years for a really long time because of that. So I think it's a safer pick to go somewhere else. Yes, someone will make a more immediate impact, but I don't think you want to be tied down to a situation like Philly has with Nerlens Noel right now.
Yeah, that's true. I think that it's important for the Celtics to get better for next season, but I also think that it's okay if they're not a championship team next season. If they take Embiid, then they might not be great next season. They might even think about trading Rondo and starting to move on. Maybe they take someone later in the 17th pick. Maybe they go after your boy Shabazz Napier, possible. But
Shabazz to Boston, baby.
But if the Celtics can take Embiid and really start to build about him, they're probably going to have another year of tanking and not being that great. But it might be the best thing in the long term unless the Celtics can pull off some trade for Kevin Love.
Yeah, definitely. But I also have heard that Ainge is a huge fan of the intensity and the strength and the athleticism of point guard or combo guard, basically at Oklahoma State, Marcus Smart, who has been a really good player throughout his college career at Oklahoma State. Has some issues, not off the court, on the court this year when he went after a fan once and a bunch of other issues. He was suspended for the team for a while. So I don't know if he wants the attitude of Marcus Smart, but I could see him going after him and maybe trading even Rajon Rondo.
Well, I'm not sure if the Celtics will trade Rajon Rondo. It'll be interesting to see with the Marcus Smart dilemma because Wyc Grousbeck seems to be a big Rajon Rondo fan.
Very true.
Now moving on to the rest of the NBA. Carmelo Anthony has opted out of his contract. LeBron James has opted out of his contract. Two of the best players in the league, possibly 2 out of the best 3, you could argue, are now free agents. What do you see happening with these guys?
Well, ever since the LeBron news broke, I mean, the Twitterverse has gone crazy. All social media has gone insane. But I honestly do believe that you will see LeBron James in a Miami Heat uniform, not only for the next couple seasons, but I think LeBron will stay there the rest of his career. Opting out of his contract gives the Miami Heat tons of freedom, tons of flexibility to do whatever they want, and possibly to bring in LeBron's good friend, Carmelo Anthony, to Miami to make it a big 4, if they do sign Bosh and D-Wade, which is a completely different story. I do think LeBron will stay in Miami, though, maybe take even less money than he already has, even though he's probably the most underpaid player in sports besides Tom Brady. And that, yeah, I think he'll be in Miami for the rest of his career. Although he was technically in his home when he was playing for Cleveland and Ohio, he's really at home in Miami. He's been quoted saying that. I don't think he's going anywhere.
See, I disagree with you. I don't think that LeBron James will be back in a Miami Heat uniform because he opted out of his contract. And now Pat Riley needs to form a team around him that will make him look at the Heat and say, I want to play with these guys. Right now, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, it's not enough. LeBron won't come back to that team with just those guys. Now, those guys made a huge amount of money last year. If Pat Riley wants to bring either of them back, they're going to need to take less money. Who knows if Dwayne Wade, obviously he's getting older, but Pat Riley's a big fan of his. Who knows if Dwayne Wade will be interested in taking less money to come back, or how all of that will work out. Now, LeBron may want to attract Carmelo Anthony to the Heat, but will the Heat have enough money to bring in Carmelo Anthony if they're trying to get back Dwayne Wade and also Chris Bosh to try to build this super team? It's a hard thing to do, and I don't know if Pat Riley is going to be able to pull that whole thing off. I'm not sure if LeBron James wants to go back to Miami. He was there for 4 years and reached 4 NBA finals, but maybe he looks around and says, now I've got 2 finals, now I've got 2 rings, maybe I can go back to Cleveland and try to actually build something there where I'm from, my original home. I left to get rings, now I can come back without that weight on my shoulder and try to get more rings. It just doesn't seem to to me like with all of the math that Miami's going to be able to bring back LeBron on a contract that makes him happy and that's going to make the rest of the team happy.
I mean, I do see other potential suitors for LeBron James. That's not Cleveland and it's not Miami. I think possibly the Clippers. They will go after LeBron James, even though after this whole Donald Sterling thing, it doesn't give the organization a great name per se. I think it will be interesting to see what kind of push they have. And the other team who always seems to be in the running for every single superstar free agent is the Houston Rockets, which would be crazy if you had Harden, Dwight Howard, LeBron James on one team.
Well, if you're LeBron James and you're looking around and you're saying, do I want to play with Wade and Bosh in Miami or do I want to play with Harden and Howard in Houston? You might say Houston's more appealing to you. I've already had my time in Miami. You might look around and say, what team really needs a superstar to come in to bring them to that next level? Maybe he says, Houston's the team for me. Maybe he says, Cleveland's the team for me. Or maybe he just talks to Carmelo Anthony and they decide on a random location, either again back in Florida or somewhere like California where they have, this superstar thing going on, like you said with the Clippers, but maybe he and Carmelo work something out. There's a lot of possibilities for LeBron. I just don't see him going back to Miami, and if he does, it's going to need to be with someone like Carmelo.
I think that's interesting, but from what I've seen, before you call me crazy and everyone thinks I'm crazy, I've seen signs this year of a little bit of LeBron's career and skill set almost not deteriorating, but you can see he's starting to get old. He's starting to get bad knees. He's not going up and down the court like he used to. He's not really playing transition defense. He's tired. This is the first year in Miami he really carried the load, and I think that's a problem. And I think he's going to follow the tea leaves here. He sees what's happening to D Wade. He sees what's happening to Chris Bosh as they get older, as they used to carry their own teams. He doesn't want that happening, so I think he feels the need to partner up with one or two more superstars who can really help him carry the load.
Yep.
That's all the time we have for this part of Buzzer Beaters. We'll be back after this short break.
Buzzer Beaters, now we're going to transition over to the Boston Red Sox, a team that's been struggling. They're in fourth place right now, 7.5 games behind the Toronto Blue Jays, and one of their biggest problems has been their hitting. They have not been able to score runs lately. Steven Drew's been terrible. Jackie Bradley Jr. has been terrible. Even players who were on streaks have cooled off a little bit. What do you see from the Red Sox hitters right now, and how can they possibly turn it around?
Well, hitting is definitely contagious. I think right now when everyone struggles, like youth who provided a spark or veterans who have provided a spark for a long period of time, when you see them getting frustrated, it affects the whole team. For example, I don't want to call it the young guy, but Xander Bogaerts right now, 5 for his last 52. That's insane. And he was a guy who was hitting 282, 285 for you. Earlier in the year before this slide, he was providing a lot of spark offensively, starting to see the ball better, get good at bats. Everyone was getting excited. And then veterans like David Ortiz, he has 18 home runs, but he's hitting around 250. Guys like that, in times when your team is struggling, they need to step up and carry the load offensively. That's what happened last year during the World Series run, but it's not happening this year, and that's been the problem.
It's odd because it's the same group of people pretty much that took the Red Sox to the World Series last year and had so many clutch hits and had all these walk-off wins. And now these guys, they just can't hit. And even when they are getting on base, the next guy will come up and hit into a double play to erase the whole thing. So it really doesn't make much sense to me why they're struggling. We knew that these guys overachieved last season, but it's not like this is who they are completely. They're underachieving this season, so it needs to all balance out somewhere, and you'd like to believe that somewhere along the line these Red Sox players would start to go on some sort of a streak. Now, Oakland and Seattle might not be the perfect place to do it, two teams that have great ERAs, big ballparks out west, but at some point you need to see some of these guys start to go on some streaks, and they need to break out with some big games.
And I think that will start to happen. The question is when, and will it be too late? I think for a team like this that won the World Series, it will click at one point. It's a talented group of guys, but then it all starts with the heart and soul of your team, Dustin Pedroia, who literally has had the worst year he's ever had in Boston, I think, except his first first half season in the major leagues, really, when he wasn't hitting at all. His power numbers have diminished greatly. It's gone. He doesn't hit the ball the other way anymore. Either pitchers figured out how to pitch to him, or he's hurt or he's losing it. It's almost a little scary to see.
And I think two of their biggest problems are Jackie Bradley Jr. and Stephen Drew as well, who both can't hit. And it looks like, especially with Jackie Bradley Jr., there needs to be some sort of roster move there.
It's very true. He's been really scuffling. Moving on to David Ortiz, Big Poppy. Poppy being Poppy, I guess, this year, as you could say. I mean, he has 18 home runs. He's only hitting .250 or so right now, and that's not what you expect from a guy, World Series MVP last year, who literally carried your team throughout most of the playoffs offensively. What do you see from Big Poppy, despite the fact that he's struggling and complaining when he doesn't get a base hit call?
Well, I see a lot of this complaining going on. Obviously, he's frustrated. Obviously, he's not hitting anywhere near what he should be with the average-wise. His home run numbers are okay, but everyone looks at the average and complains about that. As he noted, people are getting mad at him because he's not hitting around 300. And so I think the complaining is a problem, but I think it's more something that we as Red Sox fans need to accept because he's not going to change. This has always been the player that he was. We can go for years back, and even when Terry Francona was the manager, he came in, he complained about different things. And as long as he's producing, as long as he's hitting 18 home runs, and he's still having a good season, he does need to get that average up. But the complaining, I don't think, is that big a problem. I think it's extremely overblown. I think the problem is that even with 18 home runs, he's not producing like he should, and the rest of that lineup is suffering as well.
I don't find this to be overblown at all, his complaining, because here's a guy who's not a young kid anymore. I mean, when you look at good athletes from all different sports who ended up being the heart and soul of their team, I'll go straight to Paul Pierce, a guy who was called immature when he was younger in his first couple of seasons in the NBA, yet he matured into the great captain, the great leader, great team player he turned out to be with the Big Three during that 2008 championship era. But now, David Ortiz, he's an old guy. He's a veteran. He's been here a long time. He's won 3 World Series. He's been here before. He's struggled on teams, and he's been on teams that overachieved. He needs to keep an even keel, no matter if he's hitting 340 and going for a triple crown, or if he's hitting 250 and the team is losing every game. He needs to be that guy who's a constant happy person in the clubhouse and a great leader, but apparently he's not.
I just think David Ortiz complained a lot last season too. It was just more quiet because the team was doing so well. It's a constant thing with him and something that fans just need to accept. Now moving on to another player on the Red Sox, a young guy, Brock Holt. He's come up and he's had an amazing start. The Red Sox have been moving him around everywhere. He's adjusted beautifully, except for last night against Seattle when he was out in right field, which he had really never played at all before the season, and he struggled. He missed some balls. It was sort of a problem out there, which is something we all should have expected to happen at some point because he had never played right field before. What do you think of Brock Holt's performance, and can he keep up this amazing skid?
Obviously, I think what you can expect from Brock Holt for this year is to finish the year strong. Obviously, he's not going to continue at this pace. I mean, he's been an absolute animal at the plate, grinding out at bats, 7-pitch at bats, 8-pitch at bats, and then going opposite field for a base hit or an extra base hit. He's been phenomenal. He's been fun to watch. He's played everywhere. I mean, I think that was last week, his catch in center field. Johnny Gomes lost the ball in left field in the lights by the Green Monster, and Holt came out of nowhere to make a phenomenal diving catch, the first game he's ever played center field in. I think you can expect from Brock Holt is a guy, I'm sure most Sox fans aren't going to like this, is a guy who hit around 230 every season and who can play a bunch of different positions for you. You're not going to see Brock Holt probably become a 300 hitter in the major leagues and become an all-star, in my opinion. I think he's a utility player. Think of someone along the likes of a Pedro Siriaco when he was here, when he was tearing it up at the plate for a little while. I think that's the kind of tear you're seeing right now, and that's all you're going to see.
I think you're undervaluing him. I think he could be a legitimate starter on a team, if not the Red Sox, but I don't know if he can do it while playing the outfield. He can hit. He's proven that, but I don't know if he can hit at a level for so long that's going to be able to compensate for the lack of his ability to sometimes play the outfield. Now, we haven't seen it yet, but because he's never played the outfield before, you're going to start to see this. I think there's going to start to be more problems in the outfield. He's an infielder. He's a second baseman. He can play third base too. And I think the Red Sox made a mistake originally by bringing back Stephen Drew, which move Bogarts over to third and move Brock Holt out of the position he was playing. If you had Xander Bogaerts at shortstop and Brock Holt at third, he'd be more comfortable defensively. He'd still be hitting. Maybe Bogarts would be a little more confident in himself, still playing shortstop. I think Stephen Drew is actually a root of a lot of these problems.
I don't think Stephen Drew is the root of these problems, considering how good he is defensively. And I don't think Brock Holt moving all around the field right now is going to affect him, as he is still a young kid and a young prospect trying to prove himself at the major league level. I think one bad game we can't get too scared about in right field where he's never played. I think he knows that and he's mature enough to realize. So I think Brock Holt will be fine for the rest of the year, no matter where he plays. That's all the time we have for this segment of Buzzer Beaters. We'll be back in a couple minutes on our other set.
Welcome back to Buzzer Beaters. We're over here on our other set for a game called True or False. So let's jump right into it. The first one, true or false, the United States will advance in the World Cup.
I think you will see the U.S. advance in the World Cup. I think there are just too many possibilities for them to advance. I think their chances are just great. And I don't know how they're going to do in the knockout stage, but for group play, I think they should be fine.
Yeah, I'd like to debate this one with you, but I don't see them getting eliminated either. You know, Germany's a very solid team, but I think the U.S. is strong enough that they could tie them. And even if they lose, if Portugal and Ghana are able to pull out a tie, or with all these other crazy tiebreakers that there are, the U.S. would still move on. So I still think that there's a chance the U.S. would move on. But do you think they'd fare that well afterwards?
I think it's doubtful. I just don't think they have enough firepower as a team. I just don't think the U.S. is strong enough this year, especially without former captain Landon Donovan. True or false? Will the Celtics be a playoff team in about 2 years from now?
Well, I'm going to say that the Celtics will be a playoff team next season. I think that, first of all, the East is extremely weak, and the East, especially if LeBron James or Carmelo Anthony leave the East, is about to get much weaker. And the Celtics also are looking to improve right now. They could move up to get this number one pick. They could get Joel Embiid, who might help them next season, might not. They also could trade for Kevin Love. That's still an open possibility, in which case the Celtics would be really good next season and might even be a contender to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, seeing how terrible the East has been and is going to be. So I think, true, the Celtics will be a playoff team next season.
Well, to be honest with you, the Celtics pretty much were a playoff team this season if they weren't tanking. The East was so weak, they definitely could have been an 8 seed or fighting for an 8 seed, maybe a 7 seed if they actually played throughout the whole year. And so I do think they'll be a playoff team next year, but I do not think they're going to end up being like an NBA title contender or an Eastern Conference Finals contender.
True or false? Jabari Parker will be the number one pick in the NBA draft.
I think false. I think teams are a little skeptical of his skill set if it's NBA ready right now. I think they believe they're just shocked at Andrew Wiggins' athleticism and how he runs up and down the floor, how he can play defense, how he can play transition defense and transition offense. He's kind of a freak athletically, so I think Wiggins will go number one to Cleveland.
I'm going to say that Parker's going to end up going number one. I think he's actually the more NBA-ready player. We've heard reports from the Cleveland Cavaliers that they're very split. And, you know, we've heard conflicting reports on Wiggins, see how NBA-ready he is over the course of the past few months. And Jabari Parker looks like a guy who's really strong, is an aggressive guy who's decided that he's going to make the NBA. He's going to go into the NBA, and I think he'll have a strong career and will go as the number one pick.
True or false? The Boston Red Sox will finish north of the 500 mark this season.
I'm going to say true. I mean, they can't be this bad, right? They won the World Series last year, and I think that at the trade deadline, they'll be able to go out and get someone. They'll start to improve a little bit. Shane Victorino will come back. It's hard to believe that the Red Sox will be this bad at hitting for the entire season. I just don't think it's possible that this team that won the World Series last year, I don't know if they'll be a playoff team, but I don't think it's possible that this team could finish the season under 500.
Well, they're definitely not going to be a playoff team this year. And I do not think they're going to finish over 500. I think Brock Holt right now is carrying the load offensively for them, but I do think he will eventually cool off. And I've seen no signs of guys like Pedroia stepping up when Brock Holt eventually cools off, because he is a rookie. Bradley Jr., no production from him right now. They have basically the second worst hitting outfield in the bigs. Guys like Johnny Gomes not doing anything, Napoli striking out, skidding big time after his hot start. I just don't see them finishing above 500.
So let's move on to the last one. Luis Suarez, a player on Uruguay who also plays for Liverpool, owned by John Henry, bit a player on the ear in Uruguay's World Cup match today. This is the second time he's done this in the past 12 months. True or false? Luis Suarez bites another player in the ear, or anywhere else, by the time his career is over.
I'm going to go true. I don't know if it's going to be a player. I think he'll probably go after Mike Tyson next. It'll be a battle of the ear biters. I mean, if I had to pick, I think Tyson would end up winning. He's more physical than Suarez, but I do think true. Suarez will be up to his old tricks.
I think it's absolutely true. The guy is a sissy. He complains about everything.
He's the Ron Artest of soccer.
Yeah, he complains about everything. He bites people. He fights with people. He's another John Henry employee who's just complaining about everything. And he's just a player who's known to do this. I don't know, he's gotten into problems before with this kind of issue, with racial problems, with calling players different names. I just think it's something that you've seen before and you'll definitely see again.
The question is, if Suarez was on the Bobby Valentine Red Sox team, which player would have he been and how bad of that fight would have gone? It'd be pretty bad. I think it would probably be Lackey.
It'd be bad.
Yeah, it'd probably be Lackey. That's all the time we have for this episode of Buzzer Beaters. For Max, Mike, and everyone here at the Needham channel, I'm Ben Lewis. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you guys soon.